Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, MAST. This is the Inter-University Debate Championships and, of course, the internal dialogue of MAST. Thank you. We just had the previous, just last weekend. Last week, we had competitions from the group B and C that we had 4 universities qualifying, Kampala International University, with MOBS, Makerere Business School. Then we had Uganda Pentecostal University and Islamic University in Uganda qualifying to the next round. So we are kickstarting with Group D that has MAST, Barra University of Science and Technology. We have Mugume University. We have which other one is St. Lawrence University and Gulu University, 4 powerful universities that will be going head on and then in the next few days that we will have into these competitions, this group. So I'm privileged and very delighted to have the team of MAST into this conversation today. And of course, we are taking on the conversation on innovation and creativity in the for education, for the good of the young people. And it's a conversation that I would want us to extensively exhaust. If I possibly, I would want to just give a clear topic to it so that no one gets confused with it. Innovation is the world's emerging biggest employer, and the creative industry is the heart of innovations. Does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the sector? So this is the topic we shall have, and the topic will run through all the other 4 universities, and you all be, at the end of the day, you will have at the physical competitions, you will all be faced with this topic. By roll call, I need to start just by tapping my roll call sheet here. I want to know who is in the house with me. Do I have Melody Arindagye?
Yes, I am around.
Yeah, you just turn on your video and allow our viewers to see who you are out there. So,
all right.
Yeah, and say hello. Perfect, Melody.
Yeah.
Then also we have Mutungisa Edgar. I could turn on your video and say hello to our viewers.
Yeah, it's now on. Yeah, also viewers. Yeah, Mutungisa Edgar.
Yeah, great to see you, Edgar, once again from our previous engagement at the training. Then we also have Nakulima Denise. Good to see you, Denise.
All right, hope you can see me. Hello, everyone.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Denise.
Yeah, good to see you, Denise. Then finally we have Ricky Kasheija. Ricky.
Hi, how is everyone there? I hope you can see me. I'm eagerly waiting for all of you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Maybe right into the conversation, and of course, getting into the debate itself, I need to start with how the platform has displayed your names, and I'll start with Melody. With our first question, and they want us to have a detailed conversation around it. What would you understand by creativity and innovation? Of course, you could state it that you know and can think of.
Okay. So innovation for me, I think innovation is just anything that's a new idea, a new method of doing things, a new product. It's usually practical, being implemented in something in a different field. And creativity basically is just a skill, a talent, an area of expertise that somebody has, and where they are using intellectual property, they're using your mind, using your, how you think, how you view things, and you're just being creative and being innovative in that area. So that is really how I would describe creativity and innovation.
Thank you. Edgar, what do you think?
Okay. To me, I think when you talk about the creativity and innovation, the underlying principle here is the factor that you start to look at the world in new dimensions. And so you want to improve or add something to it. So that's what it means to be creative, that there are circumstances happening already, but then you tend to make them better. Creative, the things that you bring on board to make the world better are what we can term as innovations. That's how I can put it, really. It's important.
Interesting. Thank you. Denise, are you there, Denise? Let's have some conversation around this concept, so that at least when we get to the detail of this whole topic, at least these concepts are clear for whoever is following. Denise?
All right, hope you can hear me. So to add on what the panelists have said so far is you understand but when they say creativity, they're actually trying to pick out an aspect that can tap into the dynamic world we are in. And at the end of the day, we end up exploiting it, like it can be in terms of profit. So at the basis of creativity is rather creativity itself has the capability of tapping into the dynamic world through innovation. And they remain relevant over time. And through this, we can get a lot of profit. We can develop, basically it's someone maximizing their skill and talent to tap into the continuously changing world.
Interesting. Clear aspects that are coming out of this conversation. And I would want us to, I will pick good detail to each of these that you've highlighted. Maybe they will inform part of our bigger conversation. And yes, let me also hear from Ricky. Ricky, what do you have to say?
When you look at the idea of innovation, you know, I'm a believer. So the Bible says in Ecclesiastes, the philosopher says that there is nothing new under the sun. So basically, I believe that there is nothing new that we can do. But what changes with the idea of innovation and creativity is that how do we put a spin on things? Because when you look from the earlier on centuries after the death of Jesus Christ, you find that medicine in itself was not invented, rather it was advanced and changed. When you go down to the idea of politics, ideas were exchanged and also made better, because there was a time slavery was right. But because there was a change in idea, slavery now is something we should consider extinct. Now the issue on table is racism, which I believe in future will also be spin so people can start looking at each other as people. So it's basically a way of putting a spin on things that are already existing, but also making them better for the future, because that is what advancement is. And I think that is how creativity and innovation come to play into the whole matter.
Yeah, interesting aspects there coming from trying to take us back to history and, of course, to the Bible times. Ricky, right there. I would want us to get further into one aspect also. I want to invite Arinda, Melody. Melody, why do you think it is important, or do you think it is rightly ideal to adopt creative means and innovation in our systems? Edgar, are you here?
Yes.
Yes, I'll direct the same question. Your internet is breaking, but possibly we'll get you. Why do you think it is important to study or adopt the creative means and innovations in our system today?
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's an interesting question. But to answer it briefly and maybe just at the face of it, the fact that globally, most people or the world is progressive. And as such, it leaves you behind if you don't. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're coming, yes.
Exactly, yeah. So it leaves you behind when everyone else is globalizing, you're putting on a creativity and those innovative ways, for you are caught up in the primitive setting. So that alone is harmful because it's not in line with the progression that is desirable. But beyond that, to be more specific, you lose out on very many other benefits, like capital, for instance. Because when the world is all on the streams of creativity and progression, then there are other factors like or other systems through which people make money that are more creative or that are new as compared to the ones that existed before. So for instance, currently, many people are doing businesses online. The people that can get to other online business and platforms and advertising and all those other things. So imagine you are a company or your country as a whole is left in the shadows where the company still operate in the normal old-fashioned ways. You definitely can't be able to compete in the other world where people are actually embracing the new technology and the new creativity. So that's why it's important for development, especially also important that if you progress and progress also in other countries as a whole, you ought to embrace creativity because you just can't run away from it.
Okay, Denise, what are your thoughts? I want to pick again your mind here. Why do you think it's important, of course, to study and also adopt the creative means and innovation in our system today?
I think it's quite important to adopt the creative means because for starters, they help you remain relevant in the industry, rather, or in everything. Because for starters, creativity itself keeps you there. You have the means to keep on adapting to whatever is coming in. Because we know we are subjected to numerous and continuous changes that are quite uncertain. So if you choose to ignore this aspect that keeps you relevant in this world, then you're actually risking maybe you're risking losses because for starters, this is something that has the ability to tap into the continuously changing things, bring up relevant things that are required by people, let me say on market relevant products, which people are continuously going to buy, and it captures their attention to this. So at the end of the day, this keeps you quite relevant in this changing world, and your business can thrive. For example, if it's a business, or this skill can thrive and help out throughout as long as you adapt the creativity and you keep innovating basing on the skill. Thank you.
Okay, interesting, Denise. Is Melody back? Melody, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry. I think my device froze and I couldn't do anything.
Sorry.
So I could hear what was happening.
Are you clear now?
Yes, I hope so.
Okay. What we're saying, if we pick from what Edgar said, of course they hinted on the aspect of the appreciation of online business, and of course also trying to fit into competition. And Denise has also added on to the aspect of the relevancy and continuity if we have to really penetrate the global markets. And these are, of course, are good aspects that we need to look up to if we have to have innovative and creative means adapted into our system. So right there, that's what I was trying to understand. Do you think it's really important to study and have these creative means adopted in our system?
Yes, I do. And I really would agree with both of them because of course, one of the major importances about anything that one is doing is that you need to be able to satisfy the demands and the needs of the people in the market, the people in your target population. So that's why we need to have innovation because problems change. Our target market is changing, our target population is changing, times are changing. The rate at which they're changing also changes. So innovation is really, really important in order for us to keep at pace with the fast changing dynamics of the world. And as Denise said, remaining relevant and being able to meet the needs of the people in the market, in the population, so that you're not a misfit or you're old fashioned and failing to adapt with what is happening. So for example, it's like in the past lockdown, the education system in Uganda, I think, has really suffered a lot because of failure to adapt a lot of innovation. We have this system of children must go to class, sit in front of a teacher, look at a blackboard, get homework, write it on paper and send it. But very many other countries have moved ahead because of innovation, using online, ways of learning, finding ways to have children in class even online, doing exams and assessments online. And I think it's that helps the relevance. How relevant is what we are studying? How relevant is the service that we are providing to the people in the community? Are we able truly to meet the needs of the community, of the market population in the way the world is changing? Yeah, I think that's where the importance of innovation and creativity comes from.
Interesting. Ricky, I would want to get you off a little from what Melody and the rest have really brought out. Of course, Melody has brought in the real life and what is happening today from the lockdown issues, COVID-19 issues that have possibly tried to open our thoughts and focus on to bring out innovative and creative ways of doing things, including that even schools should have been opened if we are really adopted creative ways of operation. I want to bring it closer to what you think. What creative and innovative skills are needed possibly today, and what would be the best approach, for example, for the government to ensure that we deliver on this?
Thank you so much. The idea is that we have to consider the statistics first. And looking at a country like Uganda, where 78% of the population is under 35 years of age. That means most of these people are people with capacity to learn, adapt, change, and grow. Therefore, the idea that innovation should be kept from them by the way Melody has put it out, our education system failing to adapt, that's already a disservice. Because things like computer skills, which are very necessary for a moving world, a moving, changing world, they are left behind because the students do not have them anymore. Things like the idea of communication skills, the understanding of what the political and the economic market at the globe scale looks at, is also left behind. We find that most of the programs we are taught at university fail to inculcate such issues into what we are being taught. Because I feel like we as a country, we as a population that's under 35 are not meeting the necessary requirements that are needed for us to adopt this world. Because studying the same things people were taught 30 years ago is no longer applicable. So we need to look at changing situations. For example, I remember there's a time when Chambogo students invented a car of sorts, a car engine. And the publicity that was given to them was very great and awesome. But what failed me was the idea that our government could not come up and institute settings that would enable more students to do similar things. Because most of the students struggle to do specific projects, and after a project falls through, there is no follow-up that's given by the education system. Yet it is such innovations that would be necessary to push them further, give them further education, proper facilitation that is necessary to advance their knowledge, even within the classes. I think we should be able as a country to adopt what we study every day.
But Ricky, right there.
Yes.
Ricky.
Yes, please.
I see there's excitement around that is about with the cars and with the Kira EV. And I think government is really interested in doing that, including with market. So I think one would want to believe that government is now into the appreciation of technology as something that they would work on.
Truly, they are interested in the appreciation of technology, but I don't think they're doing enough in inventing this technology. Because if they were interested in inventing this technology, we would have more laboratories in different institutions purposed for specific events. We would have more facilitators specific to advance knowledge of students in the line of such work. Because just a mere appreciation of something done is no longer enough. We need to actually be part of the process that builds such events. It's no longer just enough for us to see something that's already done and appreciate it and probably award it. But what are we doing to progress as a country? Because what I've seen Ugandans do is that they are progressing more in the fields they are very well known at. For example, agriculture. Most Ugandans are now switching up their ways of farming because it is profitable and well known to them. And the government is also playing this role in helping them, because I think from the earlier on years, we saw the great works of NADS in the different rural areas, and people really prospered from this. But what are we doing for technology? Because that is where we're headed. I think that begs a question for everyone in the room today. Thank you.
Interesting. Edgar, let me invite you. Edgar, NDP3, I think it has the aspect of innovation and creativity. Government feels they will want to use, they will all rely so much onto creativity from the NDP3, and they're trying to put a lot of funding in these aspects. Do you think this is a great approach, or what should be done better to ensure that we deliver much on innovation and creative ways?
Okay, so I think I have very many issues with the government's approach. And one that is known is globally is the fact that we have almost the best in terms of planning, just paperwork, but implementation, it's always zero. I think that's like a global, now it has become like common knowledge. It's known almost forever. Now, in that regard, we would appreciate that it's part of the National Development Plan. But then the question becomes, what in practical ways on feasibility has the government done to actually actualize those incentives? Because as I said, we have to look at the strategy or the long-term plan and the step-by-step mechanism through which government wants to achieve such. Because definitely, that's like how Ricky somehow perhaps tried to highlight. The fact is that even when it's not enough for it just to be willing, when you can't actually deliver. So the question here is, for instance, what are the government's priorities when it comes to that development? I mean, the NDP3, because they say we want to do creativity, but then when they start to impose things like, taxes on internet, even in times of COVID-19, when all the lessons and educations, is shifting from the physical to online, right? Definitely, that's like an innovation, perhaps, that I would expect to see the government trying to say, oh, I think since education is now turning into online, perhaps we should even instead reduce the data costs, or perhaps we should even make internet free. That should be a conversation to show that indeed government is committed on making innovation and creativity like grow. But instead, what we see them doing the opposite. I can confidently say that the government, for instance, in regards of education and innovation, the government has become the enemy of progress to its own people, because we see the bills of institutions, the tuition and all those things not changing. We see there is no any kind of commitment in improving like the network coverage and capacity of like in different societies, so that there's network, internet. We see instead of giving perhaps like data, cost reduction, we see instead more taxes on internet. So really, we can now try to differentiate that whereas the government of Uganda in their national development plans, perhaps they say we are committed to globalization, for perhaps definitely for political issues, and also to show that they're also not left behind. But when you go to feasibility, I think there are still very many gaps and questions that we ought to interrogate. And I think that's what the problem is.
Thank you, Edgar. Maybe we'll need to dissect further on the NDP3, and there's quite a lot that will come out of there, and that we need to pay attention to, especially around creativity. Picking that now, we as a country, the lessons we picked from COVID would allow us do much more in that regard. I just want to bring on Denise. Denise, we are trying to understand possibly what government should be its best approach in ensuring that we deliver on innovation. But also, I want you to just let us know or give us what you think on the best or the creative and innovative skills that you think are much more needed at this time.
Right now, one of the aspects we should really acknowledge is we're in a world that is quite changing in regards to technology. So that brings us to a very important point that if the government was to tap into something that is quite, that is quite important right now, it would be the technology bit. This ranges from IT to, let me say, the devices out there, provided we can have the capacity to put out these devices ourselves. So this really brings us to a very important point that end of the day, one of the most relevant things or the creativity that we should really put out there should be in regards to technology. So we should really look at maximizing these fields. This can range from us, let me say, it can range from the government empowering students, putting enough laboratories. Secondly, it can range from the government incentivizing them, giving them, let me say, internet, the funds that they need to realize what they're actually doing. Because a lot of students have brilliant ideas. People can actually, because I remember way back then in my own level, people could actually come up with apps that can solve the day-to-day life. But at the end of the day, the government should be able to tap into this and incentivize these people so that they can at one day realize what they are doing. Because the point in which you're lacking is actually implementation. Of course, we are good at identifying that someone has a brilliant idea, we give them some bit of publicity, but at the end of the day, the idea just stays like that. 2 years down the road or 1 year, you don't know what is happening, but the idea was quite brilliant. So the government really needs to tap into this. So I think the lacking here is we have failed to identify that tapping into this creative industry could be actually the answer. For starters, that's something that could give us some sort of competitive advantage when you look at the global market, because we have the youth who are actually willing and have brilliant ideas. So what if we tap into that? Very brilliant idea. Yeah. Audible, I can't hear you.
Okay, I was unmuted, sorry. I was muted. Denise, I just want you to just give me about 3 skills that possibly are needed today to allow us go past this failure of us using innovations and creativity.
So for starters, we really need the computer skill. You need the computer skills. Everyone at least should be at a point in time where they can where they can find their way around any gadget. Secondly, also what is very important and relevant, we need also, what can I call it? I think the art of communication, which can be the communication skills. We need to reach at a point where you can deliver your point. We also need these writing skills, because at the end of the day, to get a funding for your proposal, you must be able to put it down on paper and explain precisely what you're offering, so that people can understand that, yes, for starters, this is what they are saying, and this is how we can tap into what they're saying, their idea, and we realize it and actualize it. Yeah.
Melody, what do you think? Melody, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I think most of the speakers that have spoken have really mentioned the idea of implementation and really brought out the aspect that one of the biggest problems that the government is facing is actually implementing the perfect we have. And it just got me thinking, what is making us fail to implement these things? And one thing that came to mind was the idea of relevance. You see, one important aspect about innovation and creativity is it must be relevant to the target population. So sometimes I look at some of the things that the government is fronting with in innovation, and I ask myself, how relevant are these things to Uganda? Even with the Kiwi motors, the electric cars and all that, how relevant is this in Uganda? How many Ugandans are going to see an electric car and think it is great? It's a great thing to use. And that aside, is the Ugandan market able to produce this? Aside from relevance, we also need to think about capacity. Are we able to produce it on a wide scale? And is Uganda able to compete with the other motor companies in the market in producing electric cars? We have big companies like Ford and Tesla that are now producing electric cars. Are we sure that in Uganda we can really break out and convince Ugandans? Because another thing we need to think about is Ugandans have a copycat tendency. Ugandans want to do what they see on TV. They want to buy the kind of clothes they see on TV. Even in our creative industry, in our movies, our music, our fashion industry, I see a lot of copycat tendency. So I think that one important thing as we look into innovation is we need to make sure that even as the government encourages people to be innovative, let's make sure that the innovations that are coming up, the plans that are coming up, are making sure that these innovations are relevant to Uganda. One of the biggest things.
Melody, right there, you talk of us really having our initiative with the Kira Motors, yeah, and we have, of course, Tesla and Ford almost coming up with the same, and of course, in there you talk about our mindsets, our minds appreciating what is foreign and not really what we make out here. You think then whatever we create or innovate internally here will penetrate the market?
Yes, I think.
If yes or no, how then do we work on mindset change to allow for the population to accept the products we will be coming up with creatively, innovatively out here?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And I think that it is very possible for us to come up with innovations that can break the market. And I will still stand by my previous point and say that the only way to do that is by thinking about what is relevant to Ugandans today. So most Ugandan families, even families that are involved in politics or whatever it is, are involved in farming. I really think that the greatest area for innovation in Uganda would be in either the agriculture sector, the tourism sector, the education sector. These are things that are real in Uganda. So if we come up with ways of improving our agriculture sector, people are becoming busier day by day. If we come up with better mechanisms of planting, of growing crops in like the mountainous hilly areas of Western Uganda or in the semi-arid areas of Northern Uganda, those are things that can actually be really, really relevant to the Ugandan mind, to the Ugandan person. A large percentage of the population will be able to relate with these things, because in coming up with innovations that people have already done that are not really like so original, it's just like a modification or an advancement of something else that we have already seen. The people in Uganda who are already exposed to the idea of cars, the population in Uganda that can afford cars, that is aware of what a car is, that can appreciate an electric car, is already aware that Tesla has made better cars. Those people are not going to buy those cars. But if we look at things like agriculture, where Ugandans really need help with agriculture, then we can be able to move in that direction. When you look at our education system and think of ways that we can improve the education system according to the Ugandan situation, then I think that can be more relevant, and then people can be more able to accept it, and it can more easily break into the market. Yeah.
I'm still bothered about the issue that we are allowing our minds to appreciate foreign products, yet we have initiatives that are already local and would allow us possibly compete favorably. Because if there is an innovation that has Kira and the cars are out there, and of course you talk about the Ugandan markets, those that understand the cars already know that Tesla has better ones. I think if the technology is the same, yeah, and there's appreciation that the technology is the same, then why not? Why is it that we can't allow our people, our mindset, accept that the locally produced cars here or innovations here would really be the ideal to actually even boost our economy?
Yes, so I think that one way is leadership by example. So we have the Kira Motors, but we still see the government giving millions of money to our ministers to buy cars from Toyota, to buy cars from Ford. If the government is really convinced and wants to promote the industry in Uganda, let's see the government encouraging our parliamentarians to buy the Ugandan-made cars. And then we can actually see our leaders using these cars. Ugandans will understand that this is great, this is authentic, we can use this, we can move on. If I remember that in the first lockdown, there was a phone assembly company that was even measuring temperature and all those things in the COVID situation. I've not seen any single Ugandan, not even our leaders, ministers of health or innovation, science, none of them has that phone. so that they begin to cause publicity. Because sometimes, you know, we have Uganda, we have a problem of chiwani, where people come up and tell you, this thing is good, this is good, but even that person themselves, they're not using it. So I think one way to change the mindset of people to believe in what Uganda is creating is when we see our leaders, when we see the people who are fronting the aspect of change, living that out. It's like in the medical field, I'm a pharmacist in training. So when I tell people about healthy living, when I tell people about, you know, avoid soda, avoid eating chemicals, I need to live that reality in my life. People need to be able to look at me living a normal life without having to be involved in all these unhealthy things that I'm preaching. And then someone can actually believe, oh yeah, by the way, that's a good way to live, it's possible. So I think one way of creating that mindset change is when we have our leaders leading by example and actually picking up these innovations, actually buying Uganda and building Uganda. And then I think other Ugandans can also follow up with that.
Okay, interesting. Ricky, you see what Melody is trying to advance, but our president himself puts on local products. His shirts, he never changes his shirts lately, because they are locally made here. But personally, and many of us here have not really jumped onto the wagon of saying, okay, if the president is putting on something made by native here in Uganda, I can also put on the same, and that will be my design. We don't see that. Ricky, do you think that when we have our innovations and whatever we'll have created out here, we'll have to support them? If not, what is the best way to have this mindset change?
I believe Melody is on the right track when she's arguing for relevance and how we can self-promote our own products. But looking at the greater scale of who a Ugandan is,
the president is the number one promoter. He started it. Are you putting on the same product?
Well, personally, I'm not. But then let's look at the idea that who a Ugandan is. For a Ugandan to use a product made in Uganda, it has to go down to the cost. So I think we need to start looking at the idea of cost. For example, we have friends who have certain businesses, and out of our friendships, we are trying to support them. But we do realize that the cost of production is something that's way far behind our understanding as Ugandans, because we want very cheap things, and we cannot afford to use the authentic products, which are necessarily expensive. Because when you look at the market today has very many cheap, unauthentic, yet imported things. And that is the first thing, because truth be told, the shirts that the president puts on, in as much as they are Ugandan made, they are not cheap. The linen he wears is very expensive, and he can afford it. Yet the clothes that we buy secondhand usually are very cheap, easy to access. Everywhere you turn, you're going to find a boutique that can actually afford you a cloth. So we need to start understanding, how do we avail the products that we are making in Uganda? Then also, how do we make them cost effective? So in as much as we are still blaming our government for not doing that or falling short of something, we need to have that knowledge of the cost production. The idea of cost production comes and says that, okay, if I'm going to produce probably, if I'm going to bake a cake for about 20 people, that cake is going to cost me about, as making such cakes, I will be costed about 60,000. So plus transportation, that would be about 70. So if I'm asking for 80,000, that is ideal. Yet companies like Hot Cloth are going to avail you cakes at the cheapest at 60,000. And Ugandans do not understand that enterprises as these, they are made to do large-scale production, and large-scale production in a way cuts down the cost of production and makes the selling of goods very cheap. So as Ugandans, we need to understand that for any authenticity to be made, there's an idea of cost production that needs to be extended out to the government, rather to the people. And that's why we say that the idea of changing skills, all the knowledge and that we are pushing out into the students today in school has to change. We need to start considering the financial market, the financial status, the global scale as to how the economy works, so that we can be able to help them understand or appreciate from their own countries. Ugandans are very big supporters of Ugandan food, and Ugandan food is very cheap. Yet also Ugandans are the very biggest supporters of imported recipes. For example, the chicken of KFC, the different mustard tested foods that are sold in Kasheija. They are quite expensive. Yet Ugandans bother to go to such places. Why? Because the appreciation of the idea of such is low. And the idea of making something for yourself from the product that you have is also low, because we are always trained to appreciate things that are not from within. Yet that has to be changed from the time we are in school, because our schools have shown us history that is mostly not Uganda. They don't teach us about how to function in a world that is basically not Uganda. Yet the skills we need today are here. So I think that's where we should start. How do we make the idea of production effective? Because what I loved about the Ugandan government, especially when the minister, maybe a Chambati, back then was still in office, when she introduced the Bobo thing, she saw it that most of the products that Ugandans are pushing out were regulated by the National Bureau of Statistics, National Bureau of Standards. And these products, on top of regulating their production, they also put a cost on each product that was effective, that was effective and also efficient for the market that we are going to sell it to. In that, for example, Turkey expanded their business to making toilet shoes and toilet paper. And when they did that, they started producing quite tissue. They made tissue that was above the normal tissue that was being produced in, and they made it cheap. Yet the cost of production was high at the moment. What the government did is that they came in and incentivized such companies. So if we made the idea of cost production, the Ugandans, especially the Ugandan investors, and how they can still produce goods, send them out to the market with low cost, and still make it, I think is a way of changing Ugandan perspectives. Thank you.
Interesting coming out of Ricky, and I think Mary also talked about the same. Edgar, what is coming out clear here, and I think that I need us to exhaust much, is on mindset change. But of course, Ricky, the Melody have talked about issues of cost of production and possibly having incentives, providing incentives that would help the market players to develop or develop and produce items at a relatively affordable price for our local markets. And he suggests maybe possibly that could be the reason why our people are really not into our local products, because of the cost of production. But I would maybe want to say no, and I'm really not yet convinced, but maybe you convince me further. But Edgar, I want to bring you on and try to ask, how best do you think government can support, activate the innovation and entrepreneurship? Because now I think we're turning into discussing the entrepreneurial bit of it. So I want you to let us know how best can government support and activate these areas.
Okay, yes, thank you so much, Mr. Damiano. I think the conversation earlier was interesting. I was trying to find a way how to come in. Yeah, but
please, you can have your take on that also. Have your take on what they have said and just flow in with what I've asked also.
Okay, yeah, so you see, Mr. Damiano, we need to recognize a few things, and this is actors. So we need to first ask ourselves, which Ugandan does Museveni inspire as regards to fashion? Why would I put a shirt of Nike just because the president puts it on? If the same shirt perhaps was put on by Sheila Gashumba.
It's not the design. It's not about the design, but it's about the maker. If we have products of genuine quality made here, then possibly if the young people start embracing them, then they would have designs that really fit into the young people's designs. So the first thing I think the president does is that if I can put on a Ugandan product, like the Indians don't really put on any product apart from what is made in India. Then why not us?
Yeah, so I think to answer that, I'll just give you one example of two drinks. We have Minute Maid, we have Splash. Splash is made from Uganda, and yet Minute Maid is by Coca-Cola, an external company. But Minute Maid, a liter is only at 4,000, and yet for Splash, a liter can go to 8,000. So you can see how flawed our market systems are and how our tax regime is, to the extent that products that are made locally are more expensive than even ones that come from the foreign markets. What therefore that means, just on the issue of costs, Ugandans will still prioritize perhaps something that comes from abroad and not the one from Uganda. But beyond the issue of costs, by the way, I think there's also an issue of mindset change. And I think this is where you first asked somewhere. So we need to recognize then that Ugandans have lost hope, one, from the illusions of their government. Because a government that lies to you that we support Bubu, that is by the same president, and yet the same government has, every time, just recently, they were trying to import cars using our COVID-19 money to buy cars. Those cars, they are not made by Kira EV, if I talk about local innovations, right? The same government, they tell you about how the education system and the health system is okay. When the MPs get sick, where do they go to? They go to Kenya. But the same government will tell you on paper on how you should support Ugandan hospitals and have nice doctors. Yet when they themselves fall sick as the government officials, they run to Kenya. The same government will further lie to you that they care about local products and tell you how they want you to build the Rubawa hospital. But up to now, we can't have the Rubawa hospital because they don't have those emergencies. What therefore that means is that all these consistent failures, whereas people joke about them on social media, but they never forget there's a long-lasting impact of such failures and lies and illusions that people with time get to lose trust from everything that even the government says. So even when it makes sense, but they feel like anything from Uganda, the fact that even their leaders themselves don't practice what they preach, they get to feel it's in any way fake, even when it's actually legitimate. So I think that mindset change is something that can only be solved when you have those credible examples and the leaders to live that talk. And then, but also perhaps the president should also assert see. Then I don't see what is stopping the same president who gives a lot of, we are buying these cars again from abroad, all those billions. Why not use our local people here who inspire fashion and make them actually design from the designs made by Uganda? And trust you me, you're going to see very many people, young people here trying to put on the same. So I think it's all about also marketing. Now let me come to your question. How best can we tackle the issues of innovation and entrepreneurship? I'm going to give like 3 stepwise mechanisms that I think are going to be very easy. One, I think the government needs to educate people. I think education is the first instance, because even the issues of electric cars that the guys are talking about, how many even Ugandans understand the implications of an electric car over a normal car of petrol? Very few will understand that the dynamics are not just about advancement and technology, but the dynamics are rather about climate change. And the question then also becomes, how do you convince a Ugandan to prioritize climate change, one who even has no food today, over the common necessities like finding firewood to prepare his own food, you see? So it's like, it's a little complicated that you need a lot of sensitization to first make people appreciate why certain innovations are good, not just because for the sake of they are trending, they're a new trend, they're a new norm, not really, but because of the implications, even on health, even on climate change, and all those other spheres. So that when people first appreciate that need and know how little it can be to their own lives, then perhaps they can first change their mindset and appreciate the second idea I'm going to talk about. So after that, now you come to the second idea, and that idea is on making the environment friendly to those innovations. What does this mean, especially in regards to entrepreneurship? The government, if it has real ministers that take care to know or endeavor to know, must understand that already many youth are engaging in online businesses. So if you care about that entrepreneurial part of it, and you know your youth, even because of COVID-19 and all those things that have distorted the normal dynamics of the world, have resulted to online business and trading and advertisements. So the question is, how do you create an enabling environment for such people? Do you make internet cheaper, or do you introduce the 12% tax so that you even cut them off the mall? So if the government answers that question, using the format that says let's introduce more tax because we need revenue, then they become again an enemy to that progress. So the environment does not become enabling. But then beyond that, the question is on the issue of responsibility. The government must accept, and with us that Ugandans need to also get the responsibility that it's their part to understand that things are changing. For instance, you must do online studying now, for instance, but also the government must know there is a burden on their part, not just telling Ugandans to do things, do this, advance this, when for them they're just sleeping. Even the government's ought then to look at infrastructure, for instance, of network. We are here connecting digitally. The government knows ever since COVID started that things are going not to go back. We are now in the new normal of internet and etc. But no energy has been made so far in regards to improving the network coverage of Uganda. All we hear is things are changing, embrace the new normal, embrace the new normal, as though the public should just embrace the new normal on its own. Investment from the government. So when the government lacks on that responsibility gap, then it becomes very tricky. But then lastly, I think for innovation and entrepreneurship, what the government then can do, after it has done education and sensitizing, number two, after it has created the enabling environment, in terms of lessening those tax burdens and etc., then I think the government can largely now organize some competitions or do whatever now they're doing. I've described in that the NDP3, those other large sectors who are even the funding and the priorities are now the ones of people that are competing, that are producing things that are more appealing to the world and solving challenges. So I think that we can now come to that level. But beyond that, there are these basics of mind change, there are these basics of education and sensitization, there are these basics of rebranding and creating and responsibility that the government ought to appreciate and enact. Beyond that, or if failure to do that, then all these things will just happen. The NDP3s, which I even have NDP4, NDP5 repeat the same, but they may not be fruitful. I think that's what needs to be done.
Thank you very much, Edgar. It's an exciting conversation to follow through and listen. And you saw all your submissions. I want to bring on Denise. Denise has largely been quiet. Denise, would you want to have your mind on this area before we move to the next part of conversation?
Yeah, I think just to throw more light to the bit of mindset Edgar has highlighted, mindset is actually what this whole system is based on. And if we're to realize the innovation and creativity, we really need to tackle the bit of mindset. Because for starters, you realize from up there, we don't really have a friendly environment to realize the creativity. Because for starters, the creative industry, like the different ventures there, like photography, things like that, they're not acceptable. People actually think, don't give them a lot of time. They rather advocate for quite other different things. So this shows us that for starters, for the bit of mindset, we have failed to bend into a way that tells us that this is the field we must really exploit. Furthermore, in the bit of mindset, it would have given us a highlight that yes, for example, if agriculture is our backbone, what if we change the mindset of these people to realizing that there's more to agriculture than just petty money which farmers actually get. So this shows us that at the end of the day, we need to tackle the mindset, but in a way that gives us a competitive advantage over other countries. So if it is agriculture that is our backbone, what about if we invest more in agriculture? I mean, if we put out coffee that can compete for the market, where someone can hesitate to buy Nescafe and say, I'm buying a Ghanaian product. So really this goes ahead to, still the government has what to say in this, because for starters, this should be something solved from up with there, putting a friendly environment, going into the schools and teaching these children to identify to what is theirs. Let the children understand, instead of studying about things that are quite, okay, I can't say typically relevant, things that don't concern Uganda, why don't we preach for Uganda and we identify that in this Uganda of ours, this is what our grandparents have survived on. Let us give these children some sort of identity. And they know for certain it's agriculture, they need to engage, but let them know the use of this so that they grow up knowing that this is something that highlights Uganda as a nation. This is something that they can build up, innovate. Let the government also put a friendly environment so that the mind is tackled for starters, and also you enable this population at large with some sort of advantage where they know that this sector, if this is what you're good at, then we can bring it up 100%. Then if you make such changes in such sectors, trust me, we can move on and tackle other sectors, and the mindset will be changed, because for starters, we understood what we stand for as Ugandans. And then people can afford to have conversations of, let me buy a Ugandan product, because they have known the relevance of engaging in what is useful and what it has brought on the table for us. So I think that is it.
Thank you, Denise. I want to invite all of you just to just bring out three areas, each one of you differently, are not the same. Three areas where you think would be the most ideal to capture the issue of mindset change. Three, each of you differently, because what I've just really what is coming out clear here is that even if government puts up the idea that we can have as much creative and innovation as possible, we still have the burden of changing the minds of the people in appreciating the goods, the products, whatever you'll have come up with as innovators. So my question would be issues of mindset change. Where do we get to ensure that we overcome this? Let me start with Melody.
Okay. So I think three. So I think my first one would be to do with, I think it all comes down actually to education, and it would be one, in our education system, our syllabus. You see, one of the biggest issues I have with our education system is, for all the years I have studied, I cannot say that I have been taught how to love Uganda, support Uganda, look to develop Uganda. Majority of my colleagues in medical school are looking for the next opportunity to leave this country. Yeah. And why is that? Throughout our primary and secondary, we learn about British Columbia, how Tanzania has been developed, how South Africa has developed, how North America did what. What are we telling these young children? We are telling these children that, look here, Uganda has problems, we have failed to solve these problems, but you see there in America, in Canada, they have solved these problems. So I think the first issue would come back to looking at what is the backbone and what is the message that we are giving to young children during their education process? Are we making children grow up into professionals, into citizens that love Uganda, that want to give back to Uganda, that see hope in Uganda, that want to utilize their energy, their mind, in building Uganda, in developing Uganda? I think that is, for me, I think that is really step number one. And it goes to every single sector, because even in the development that we're talking about, the different innovations, none of them is based on like using tools from Uganda. We are importing tools to work in our fashion industry. We have cotton here, but apart from maybe Nightil, which other companies are creating? We produce coffee here. Which company in Uganda is producing first grade coffee and delivering it to Ugandans? You know, we have cows. Do we have any leather tanning industry that we can say we make Ugandan shoes or Ugandan anything? I think step number one is how in our education system, when these children walk home at the end of an academic year, are they walking back with hope that Uganda can be better, that they can actually put their energy in building Uganda and it can yield something? Or are we telling them that, you see, Uganda, yes, there were landslide last year, there was this, but now you see for Tennessee, the floods, they solved it like this. Their electricity problems, they solved it like this. I think that's one. Number two is we need people now at the level of innovation to understand the different kinds of innovation and the different avenues of innovation. Very many times when we think about innovation, we think about a type of innovation called like radical innovation. That is, we are creating new technology to a new target market. But there are very many other kinds of innovation. For example, you can create new technology to already existing market. So we have problems, for example, in the health sector. How about we come up with new ways of solving already existing problems in the health sector? Or how about we get already existing technology and find ways of using it to solve a different product? For example, apps. if we find ways of getting an app, for example, that can be used to track animals, that can be used in the agriculture sector, I think that would be a better way. Like, we need to have more education, more conversations on the different kinds of innovation, so that the mindset of the innovator now is a more open mindset. It's not a closed, fixed mindset that looks at innovation as a very impossible wall to crack. And then I think that another important way of changing the mindset of Ugandans is also comes back to example. I think we've really talked about it throughout the course of this conversation, and we need to see influential people in Uganda take up a stand of being Ugandan in real life. Like, when we look at our entertainment industry, for example, most of our entertainers are bleaching themselves to look less Ugandan, are doing plastic surgery to look less Ugandan, are changing their accents to appear less, to seem less Ugandan. You know, the way they dress is following more of the Hollywood trends. I mean, you find a Ugandan dressing up like how people dress up in winter, but we're living in a tropical climate. So I think we need to also have that kind of example, tapping into influential figures in society and letting them be the instruments of change, letting them be the instruments, because I think we've seen it so much in Uganda, where we have that movement. People love their people. People love their socialites. If a socialite wakes up in the morning and decides they're not going to vote, I'm afraid a large percentage of Ugandans will not show up for voting. So if we can tap into that resource in our population and look for those people who actually have some sort of influence to the people down at the grassroots of Uganda that we want to reach out to and change mindsets, I think that can also be another good way to have that kind of change. Yeah.
Interesting. That's a mouthful. I want to also invite Denise. What do you think?
Further, to add on what you said, it's very important to understand that amidst all these chaos, at least one of the routes we can take to achieving what I would call change of mindset is through cultural institutions. This can range from the cultural institutions themselves to preaching the culture out there in the schools. Because for starters, we understand that we have certain viewpoints that bring us back to the table and unify us, let me say, as Ugandans. And this is the cultural heritage we share. You know, at the end of the day, we come from different places. Someone can stay somewhere, but at least we need that sort of unifying factor that is preaching to us the actual Uganda thing we know. And at the end of the day, is going to help us love Uganda through thin and thick. And this is what we want, because at the end of the day, we need people who are going to prioritize their country over anything else. And this can be attained through, you know, we should preach this culture throughout. Let us teach our children how to serve these cultures, you know, generation to another generation. At the end of the day, we have a solid population which is unified, and we have people who relate to what Uganda actually is. So at one point, when you stand up and say, maybe I have this piece, I'm selling this, and it's actually Ugandan, people already have that bond bringing them together, and their mindset is quite changed, and they can afford to actually stand up and say, well, I'm buying this. Because at the end of the day, you know, through these institutions, you can attain a lot of things. There are lots of creative potentials here, there are a lot of innovations. Because at the end of the day, innovation, as she said, it doesn't be something radical. It can be something small, something that can better the world, something that can add value to something. That is also some sort of innovation. So let us also understand that through this, we can attain, you know, for example, people do small art pieces or culture, you know, those culture things they sell at those heritage places, and people buy them expensively. At the end of the day, Uganda is benefiting. But what if all our population was like that, and they valued these culture pieces, and they can afford to move them, you know, from generation to generation? People who actually treasure what we offer, the culture dances, people pay a lot of money to watch this. What if our people can identify and we maximize this unifying factor? So at the end of the day, we're going to have a population whose mindset is changed. People who understand that this is us, and they can, you know, they can buy local goods, they can develop these different aspects. So at the end of the day, we need really to emphasize the bit of unity. We need to get that identity that brings us together as Ugandans. So if we can preach this and sensitize people through schools, I think we should actually do this. Because at the end of the day, you look at what actually can unite everyone, and at least culture can go ahead and unite people, and people know we belong here. So we just need some sort of mindset identity that brings up patriotic Ugandans, And let us preach this in all our institutions, and I'm sure we can have a change with the mindsets. Thank you.
You raise an issue on culture and the backgrounds. I think I'll ask a question about that, but later. Let me bring on Ricky and we.
So thank you for the question. I think mine is a foreign one. Let's go back to an experience I had earlier. Today morning, I went to a cafe in, I think it's around Tinga. And while I was there, when they gave me the menu had basically meals written down and their prices were written down in dollars. That brought me to the idea that this is a Ugandan cafe targeted for a different market that's not necessarily Ugandan. Lo and behold, moments later, I looked around and I was surrounded by whites. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think we need to start supporting, rather fronting more of how to elevate the Ugandan. In the same experience today, I was on a border and I saw a billboard next to Dagoria, and it had these very beautiful apartments, and they were ranging from 65 US dollars, which Ugandan can afford 65 US dollars, rather 65,000 US dollars. So it goes down to what are we doing for our countrymen? Because at the end of the day, even if I was a tourist in Uganda, I would be looking for a Ugandan experience, not living in my own country, but in a different country, having the experience of my own country in a different country. So how do we package our goods and services to fit the Ugandan today? Because as Ugandans, we like specific things and we like them a specific way, but is the market suited to provide that to us? Above the cost, are we doing exactly what a Ugandan would be? Because bringing in culture, most Ugandans are stuck on the idea of Bitenji. But ideally speaking, how many times are you going to put on a Bitenji as a gentleman or as a lady in your day-to-day activities? So in as much as we have such specific cultural ties, we also have an advancing world that needs to be packaged specifically to us and make us more Ugandan than we are every day. So that should be necessitated in how we package our goods and services. Because when you see some of the part that when you walk into a shop and you see a Ugandan product, you will know it is a Ugandan product by the nature of its packaging. And that is basically because most of its packages are very poor. Because people are not putting in much into the invention of how their product should look like. How upscale should they look like for a Ugandan to actually be able to fancy them? So packaging of them. Now, secondly, are our products and services able to fit the capacity? Are they capacitated enough to solve the problem at hand? Because as Melody mentioned, there is a growing demand, a changing demand. But is our supply necessitated to change or facilitate that demand, fulfill the demand? Are we able to in how we produce and how we offer our services? Thirdly, is the cost. What is the cost attached to the products and the goods that we're giving out today? If the cost is too high, it is not Ugandan. Because most Ugandans, by nature of the jobs and the employment available, they will not be able to afford it. But if the cost is specific or well subsidized for a Ugandan, then it is going to be a Ugandan, and it's going to be a Ugandan product and service. So we need to look at those three things. The fourth thing is going to be background of the inventors. One thing that most people are failing to acknowledge is that our universities still have credibility in the minds of Ugandans. Their mindset is slowly being transitioned from how good they could be, because now we see most people who are becoming successful, most of the success stories being fronted are by people who did not go to school. Yet even the people who did not go to school are working tooth and nail to send their children to school. Then what is the purpose? So I'm thinking there is still credibility attached to our universities, because if we have the lowest qualification to get into parliament being a senior 6 certificate, then that should be sudden. We need to upgrade such standards to a university degree to make them more viable, more applicable, more practical, and more relevant to our university, or to our leaders. Because if you have more university, truth is that you have a different mindset from a senior six dropout. Of course, circumstances happen and people are not able to school, but the mindset is indeed different. Does not matter how well you perform, but the mindset is different. So,
okay.
And it is more
interesting.
That.
Ricky, let me also, yeah, thank you very much. I would want to bring in Edgar to also give his submission on this as we go to the next question. 3 areas. Thank you very much, Ricky. That is so wide that you've shared. Edgar, is Edgar here?
Yes, I'm here. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite a lot. And given that I'm the last speaker, we have to give 3 unique areas. It's interesting, yeah. But my 3 unique areas are going to be majorly 1, leadership, 2, the tax regimes, 3, the national pride. Let's start with leadership. I would like to go, for me to have a mindset change, I think if I visited a state house and I found the furniture of the president and also the president is the furniture made in Katanga and instead not one made in China. If I was seeing this get sick and not going to Nairobi hospital, but instead to Mulago, and I find Mohozi Kenurugawa also goes to Mulago, or their sons attend the same schools as those ones in Uganda, or if I saw the Rwanda hospital thinking about being constructed here in Uganda, perhaps I would definitely change my mind and appreciate that there is value in Ugandan services, there is value in Ugandan healthcare, there is value in Ugandan furniture, there is value in everything Ugandan. But how can I develop such a mindset when all those dope leaders I look up to don't necessarily consider anything of this in their personal lives? That's number 1. But number 2, I think we need a sense of national pride. National pride, and this is in line with what Sayatini recently was releasing. In one of their statements, I was reading about Sayatini trying to urge Uganda to necessarily go against the importation of used clothes. I think it's really a shame that the government is still, it's still not so much into that. There's always so much hesitant in appreciating that. We still import used clothes. I think the only thing we don't import are perhaps used undergarments or something. And yet we still have tile here. So I think there is that need of national pride where our leaders act as leaders and not as puppets of perhaps colonialism, of foreign influences and foreign politics, but on some basics, get to know that this Ugandan, they are this small, or at least we have that pride of humanity. We shall not accept anything like used clothes within our economy. At least we have perhaps 90 in those industries that can perhaps do produce such, and it's yet still of the same quality, high quality, but not exposing our health and, belittling our pride and everything at the expense of global and geopolitics and all that stuff. So I think it's very important that we look in that sector of national pride. But then lastly, it's about regimes. As I said last time, I don't really understand why a splash that is Ugandan made should cost 2 times, almost even more than Coca-Cola unfair considerations Ugandan companies, even when they're untargeted. Because we've been talking about the Kia EV motor cars and how they're nice and 80 million. Mitsubishi can go for 65 million. So I understand what's so special, exactly, right? So why would we have those Ugandan products that we definitely know that our populace alone, given their level of economic development, won't afford that much expensive in comparison to what these guys can actually afford? So there's need to again and consider the regimes around cost of production, the regimes around the taxes, but also national pride. I mean, the national pride in appreciating what comes into our country, what do we import, and what can't we import. We can't be importing toothpicks at this level. Imagine toothpicks being imported, and we still talk about national pride. We are importing used clothes. for our people to have national pride. We are even importing the basics of tomato sauce. Yet we are here bragging on how we are almost one of the best agricultural economies in the region. I think it's really a shame that the government just keep mum about such issues, perhaps because of geopolitics and all that hegemony of colonialism. I think that's bad. But then beyond that, I think I'm going to disagree with one of the things that was written by someone who talked about how we need to improve the nations of education. And, maybe I want to end with that. Perhaps for MPs, I think they would agree or disagree so much because that will cause implications of costs. If right now MPs who are just senior 6 dropouts are not comfortable with the 30 million something, they are, imagine what an MP, where the qualification has now been improved to a bachelor's or a PhD would want. And yet they do nothing. In most cases, most regards, I can put that really, I have that much evidence to talk to that the costs of the parliament vis-a-vis the kind of policies we get from them per year, the kind of legislation that we have, really, there's no matchup. So I don't think it's important. But lastly, I think the education is becoming more useless, especially because it's not creative. And why? Because I have a master's, regardless of what we can do with it. So I think it was even be better, even if they perhaps even reduce the qualifications, even senior 4. Because if a person has the capacity to engage in that political race and convince all those thousands of people they meet in their area, that they can best represent them in the parliament, just the academics that is already corrupted, and just based on, by the time someone does that, then they have really been able to appreciate life and context and convince the electorate beyond reasonable doubt that perhaps they are best represented them. And I think that's what we should appreciate about education. So I don't believe in the idea that I'm best to be a member of parliament because I have a master's. And yet many of our people don't even reach there. Why? Because the cost of education is becoming high. So that means you're going to be putting the leaders who are able, that they won't perhaps have that much money to reach that level of education, to be out. And they could be great leaders. So I don't think academic qualifications have anything to do with leadership. I think the spirit and the national pride that specific leaders have for their country, that level of patriotism and accountability in all those other things, are the ones that come in the good leadership and not necessarily the qualifications that these guys have. Yeah, so beyond that, I think those 3 issues really, the leadership, of course, for example, the tax regimes and the national pride are the things we ought to prioritize, and the country will be better.
Thank you very much.
And the mindset and all that.
Thank you very much, Edgar. I just want to, we are getting towards our closure, and want to have at least 2 areas as we get into the closure. You've made powerful submissions, and I think this is one of the most interesting conversations hosted. And let me bring on Melody. Melody, can the activation of innovation and entrepreneurship protect the national economy from a possibly forecasted slowdown in economic growth that we are seeing?
Yes, I really think that encouraging innovation can actually protect a country from economic decline or collapse and all those big words that economic analysts use, because innovation taps into something that is from us, our own personal skill in Uganda, our own personal opportunities in Uganda, our own resources in Uganda. And those are things that, no matter how bad the economy is, my brain is not going to stop thinking. No matter how bad the economy is, no matter how bad the economy is, I'm not going to forget a skill that I have. And another important thing is that if our policies are actually, changed or adjusted, then innovation, that is things from Uganda, become cheaper. The costs that we incur in importing clothes, in importing vaccines and medications, which we're even going to throw because Ugandans can't afford them, the costs that are incurred in importing all these things are decreased. And so we are sort of building up an economy that does not rely so much on external help, on external influence. I think that can be really, really important. And another important thing with innovation is the issue of the shilling. Uganda's shilling is declining every single day. Like the value of Ugandan money is really sad. I think that's like the simplest way I can say it. It's just so sad how little value our money has. And I think one of that is because we're not innovative. We depend so much on the dollar. We depend so much on what is coming from outside. But if we can depend on our own strengths, like a baby that begins learning how to walk, the more a baby, becomes stronger and learns how to walk and can get up on his own and run, is not so dependent on mommy. They can actually go and get food if they feel hungry. So I think we need to do that in Uganda and have that kind of encouragement of innovation, equipping all these people, incentivizing the innovators, educating the population, amending our policies, and ensuring that the issue of innovation and creativity in the different Ugandan industries, because I think it's not just a matter of technology, it cuts across, as we've mentioned already, our education sector, our agriculture sector, our entertainment sector, culture, and arts and crafts, all these sectors of the Ugandan industry. We need to see more innovation. We need to see more patriotism in each of these and the people as well. And I think that can really help us economically.
Thank you very much, Melody. Ricky, what are your thoughts here? Your audio?
The idea that our country needs to be innovative is very skewed to the fact that there is need to allow that innovation to happen. When I look at where I was as a student, probably 5 or 3 years ago, and where I am right now, I cannot credit that to the innovative capacity of our education system, but rather the facilitation that is by the very highly priced information, because information in Uganda is quite expensive. Look at our internet, look at the cost of education, look at the cost of the books, how much knowledge is present to the different levels. I bet most students do not know that we have a national library just down here in Uganda. Yet, this is information that is needed for Ugandans to move further. Innovation in itself goes beyond us being expected to know certain things, but rather going out of our own way to find out information that's not provided to us. Ideas in our country's system are not necessarily, they're not nurtured. They are not taken care of, like as Melody put it, as you're taking care of a baby. But what more can we do? What more needs to be done? Because I feel the idea of us blaming the government for most of this should be doubted also, because in the same country we have international schools, and we are not seeing students from international schools doing much of the innovation in our country. We have schools that have been based on religion, and they're not following the specific syllabus of the different sections of education in Uganda. But still, innovation is not catching up, and these are institutions that have been present for many years in this country. Parents have gone ahead to pay hefty sums of money for their students to go to such international schools, and still we are not seeing that innovation happening in this country. Rather, what we are seeing more of is the exportation of such knowledge. As Melody has said, that in as much as the economy is crumbling, your knowledge is yours. But if the knowledge that we have is not being kept within the country to help the country, then it's somehow self-defeating of our government to put in much of its efforts and its finances to build our education to where it is, although not perfect, and students are taking this information somewhere else. So that begs the question of what more can we do as individuals to make sure that this innovation actually happens within this country, because I would not want to believe that Ugandans are not innovative. Rather, I would want to believe that Ugandans, wherever they are, they're doing their innovation, but in a different country or in a different environment that's not necessarily crucial development of this country. Most of the biggest changes we've seen in our country, they're being made by different individuals who are not necessarily Ugandans, who are foreigners. For example, safe border. It is not Ugandan, yet it is thriving and meeting the specific need of the Ugandans. It is cheap. It is teaching different Ugandans. It is reducing motorcycle accidents, yet it is not an Ugandan-made invention. And where precedents of this going to be? They're going to be taken to the different countries of their founders. Down to Glovo. Glovo is a food delivery company, yet most of its proceeds are going to they're going to Spain because their founders are Spanish. So it is such innovations that are crucial to our country, and they are not necessarily benefiting us in the long run, in the bigger picture. For example, as Edgar put it, the idea of taxation, the idea of revenue, it is not necessarily coming down to us as well. The big question of how much more can we do? Because beyond reaching against the education system and against how poor our government could be, it should be taken down to the idea of us individuals, how much more are willing to do to change this. Because once upon a time, Ugandans stood up and fought for independence. I believe it is that same spirit that we can also stand up and change whatever needs to be changed. And that should start with how innovative can we be, how much more are we willing to learn about investment, because MTN has taken a great deal to show Ugandans how they should invest in the whole MTN share saga. So that's where our conversation should be taken. Thank you.
I want to also give different sides of conversation to Denise and Edgar, which should be summing up our conversation on topics, but then lead to the way forward. So I need to start with Denise, yeah? Okay, let me say, how can a country like Uganda be an innovative driver? What are the governmental and cultural aspects? Now, you remember we had an issue on culture. So what are the governmental and cultural aspects stopping or hindering the ability to innovate?
So one of the, let me start with the governmental aspect. One of the governmental aspects that are hindering Uganda from developing, I could term it as in there's no conducive environment, as in the environment is not friendly. This can range from multiple policies. Like, for example, there is the famous, tax holiday policy, where you're supposed to meet some sort of percentage for you to qualify for tax holiday. But this goes out to challenge an average Ugandan who basically can't even afford 2 meals a day. So if you put the price that high in that specific policy for someone to qualify to get a tax holiday, and yet they can't even, they can't manage the day-to-day expenses, that is quite challenging. So that goes back to our government and questions them to do what? To revise some of these policies and make them quite conducive to bring up the business environment in Uganda, to motivate these Ugandan entrepreneurs, the innovators, to undertake certain, endeavors, so that at the end of the day, they can pay off. So for the government to really need friendly, we need implementation policies should govern everything. The taxation should be quite fair, so that an average Ugandan who is not, who doesn't have much resources, can thrive in this quite challenging environment. And at the end of the day, they make innovations that are going to be useful to all of us. Then secondly, looking at the cultural aspects, one of the challenges we have is, I think we have lost a bit of our culture, is we want to identify with what is from out there, the foreign culture. So basically, an average Ugandan, majority of us have lost what really, we no longer know what our culture is. So this leaves us at the hands of the foreign cultures. We're looking at waking up because, we are appreciating what they're doing. It's quite fine to appreciate. By the end of the day, we should lose our sense of direction. Since we have lost our culture, as in we don't have a sense of belonging, as in people just identify with what they feel is, that hypes them at the end of the day. So that also becomes a challenge. Then also, another thing which can be on the governmental side is our government, apart from failing in the implementation bit, it also lacks the bit of, feasibility, as in it's not practical in some of its, policies it brings out that are supposed at the end of the day to favor innovation, but in the long run, end up when they are very detrimental to the innovation and the development they're actually preaching. So this can range from, the famous thing we have been talking about, which is the internet tax. A lot of businesses have, evolved and they have adapted the online thing. But unless these taxes are quite favorable, unless can be accessed, that is only and only how you can tap into this sector that is actually lucrative but is not yet exploited. So that is also something that needs to be focused on. Then also on the governmental bit, our government needs to sit down and, I think make some sort of change to this education sector that we are having. We should be really taught relevant things for an average Ugandan, not things that at the end of the day you're doing a biomedical engineering course and you're asking yourself, now what was the use of the Canadian prairies? You don't see the relevance. It's quite, I think it's quite good that at this point some of these things have been scrapped off, but we further need to revise our syllabus and we look at a more engaging way of which you can have our students gaining that theoretical aspect, but also being engaged and they can pick various skills, better their talent. We need to put a conducive environment for their minds to be actually innovative. Because at the end of the day, rather to be creative, at the end of the day, the creative minds come up with the brilliant innovations that can stand the test of time in, the evolving and the dynamics that we are facing. So the government itself needs to focus on the education, because I think education is one of the things that unite people. I think when you're looking at the lower levels of education in primary, we are a lot in primary. So we have a lot of kids. So we should give them some of these, important things that can help us, give a kid time to give a kid time to play, give a kid time to, sit around and figure out how something is going to work. So this all goes back to the what? Some of these policies need to be revised, the syllabus needs to be revised, so that at the end of the day, these problems can be fought at the root. And if we look at the children, these are the youths of tomorrow, these are the leaders. So if you give them some sort of impact that can, better their way of thinking and change the narrative of being old-fashioned, that you have been, change the mindset from that, from that tender age, then you can be assured that at the end of the day, when these kids grow up, they're going to know, yes, they're going to be more creative because they have already created things when they're young. They're going to be more innovative because they're being exposed and they know the benefit of this. Yeah, so I think I wrap up this by saying we just need a friendly environment, and we need the government to revise some of these things.
I didn't get clearly what came out culturally.
For the culture aspect, what came out from that bit is, I think majority of us want to identify with things that are not actually what I would call Ugandan. As in, we have picked a lot of interest with the foreign cultures, the dress code, the languages. You find someone thinking like, speaking a certain language, which may be local, they think that is out of context. You're not supposed to do that. So at the end of the day, we should treasure these little things that bring us to what Africa is. Those fabrics that make those nice clothes. At the end of the day, you should put up the flag. But unfortunately, we have lost majority of these aspects and, trying to look for identity elsewhere. So that as like in the culture aspect is also hindered innovation, because you look at things that used to bring us together, things like traditional dances. Some people pay a lot of money to watch these traditional dances, but you can find an average Ugandan belonging somewhere they can't actually dance, but yet if someone can pay to come and watch you dance. So that shows you that is a sector that is actually unexploited, a sector that has potential, provided we do what we acknowledge. And also furthermore, to add on that, we should change our way of thinking, as in now parents, for example, majority, an average African parent cannot accept their child to be, let me say, like a photographer, cannot accept their child to do music, because we are asserting that things for you to be successful in life, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer. So this should also be something the cultural institutions should take up, or family basis. People, as in it's the mindset at the end of the day. Parents should know that it's not about medicine. It's not about what someone can actually innovate. Someone can come up with something nice. For example, through dance, through photography, through their talent, and it's actually something promising, and they can do an innovation out of it and become creative, give out something that is quite appeasing and is acceptable in society. So that needs
yes,
to
thank you. Thank you very much, Denise. Edgar, the floor is yours.
Okay, do I still have the same time or the time has somehow reduced?
The what?
The time.
Yeah, we are short of time, so you need to use at least 3 minutes, and then we'll go to the way forward.
Exactly. Is it the same on how?
Yes, I would do. Yes, same. We're trying to discuss how can the country like Uganda be an innovation driver, and we're trying to highlight the governmental and the cultural aspects stopping or hindering.
So I think
the ability to innovate. Can you hear me clearly well?
Okay, governmental and cultural aspects. Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, so the governmental and cultural aspects. Yeah, so I'm going to first highlight what should be done. One, I think we need to have a conversation about value addition, because instead of having the 40 billion wasted on the cars and all those things that Madam Dana Twine did last time in COVID-19, I think that money would be enough to construct a factory that can actually add value to our coffee, so that we can have our coffee on the last chain of distribution. That is to say, to be able to produce our own coffee that will be served right away in hotels. Because otherwise, how would Edgar be motivated, Edgar a farmer, when he knows that whatever coffee he grows, he's going to earn just 3K per kilogram, only to go and sit at Serena Hotel and take just a cup of it at 20,000. So why would I even innovate in that regard, you see? So that lack of value addition removes all the incentive for me to innovate, because I know even if I innovate, I'm just innovating, I'm using so much energy to too little, yet in comparison of me going to spend a lot more money. It's like what is happening with last time, what was happening with cows and water, right? So some sells a liter of milk at 500, only to go and buy a bottle of Renzoli at 1,000. So that level of mathematics not operate. Why? Because there's no value added to our things. So I think if we could, for instance, add value to our agricultural products, so that we can be able to go up to the last chain of production and distribution of those products, that means there will be enough or higher return on investment. And that high return on investment would be enough to devise many people to join and innovate, because they are sure the sector is growing, they are sure they're going to earn more than they would spend on the same product. That's one that we need, that incentive from value addition. So I think it's from the governmental perspective. Now, the other issue, I think, is again on education. I think education, I'm also going to make it cultural, because I think our education culture has become so laughable. Because if I would ask you, maybe you, Mr. Damiano, anyone listening in, why would I innovate, or why would I even think beyond, when I'm sure that in the next exam at my university, I'm going to be asked to reproduce the Adam Smith theory? How would I think about giving my own? How would I think about innovating beyond that? How would I innovate at the university when I'm sure that in an engineering class, the question in the exam is going to ask me to reproduce the Einstein's equation, things that were already produced, that are already known, you see? So that means the system alone of education and the culture has been premised on the idea of go, cram, remember, and reproduce. And cramming and reproducing is so diametrically opposite to the idea of innovation. Otherwise, you cut off all the levels of thinking that will require me to innovate. Why would I innovate when I know the next exam I'm just going to be asked to reproduce the Adam Smith theory or Karl Marx theory? Why would I be able to think beyond that? So we need to check that kind of mechanism of education and the setting of examinations, that culture, so that we can be able to have people innovate. But then beyond that, maybe if we are to go global, I think again, the government needs to sow that national pride, so that incentive to understand that something Ugandan is. So if I knew, for instance, if I saw my government ban the importation of those used clothes, those recorded without bringing even post health risks. So I think I would be more incentivized as an individual to innovate and join in the textile industry, because I would be sure that my little products would have market. But now, how will I be able, when first of all, the cost of production in Uganda are high, and I know I'm going to produce something perhaps of nice material, nice cotton, if I don't compete with the cheap, old used clothes that are carried in the window market, that not only harm our national pride, but also cause unnecessary competition to the little innovations that our own youth are supposed to be having. So that lack of national pride, I think, is something that ought to be reinstated. And perhaps a certain Edgar somewhere will fill the gaps and the incentive to innovate something Ugandan, because sure it would have some market and will not be subject to that unfair competition. So I think that's how we can do it on terms of culture, in terms of our education system, but also the level of the country, in terms of value addition, but lastly also on the global level, in that terms of the incentives. I think that's what we need to do, address those gaps.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edgar. Now we're getting into our closure, and I would want to give 30 seconds to each one of you, just to give your way forward and possibly how you think would be the best approach to have innovation and creativity at the forefront of our possible development going forward. Let me start with a roll call as how we started. Melody?
Yes, thank you very much. I think the conversation has been really interesting. My final, I think, key point that I think is really, really important in having the issue of innovation really moving forward in the country comes back to the issue of having relevant, applicable policies that are not just policies on paper, but are policies in practice. This means looking back at statistics, making research before we make some of these policies that we are making, understanding how the bottom line Ugandan benefits, responds, or reacts to the policies that are coming up, and making sure that they are really made with the Ugandan in mind, not so much with all these other images that we try to think about. So I think that it's really important to make sure that the policies that we have in the country are favorable for the innovator, are favorable for the citizens that are supposed to utilize that, are favorable in the world market and with the rest of our competition. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Melody. We go to Edgar.
Yes, thank you so much. I think to the viewers who have been listening in, and yeah, to you, to the panelists, I think to the moderator, Mr. Domian, I think it has been a nice conversation. I think my last words or my last remarks on my way forward would be that we need to start rethinking Pan-African. We need to start thinking to have that patriotism for love of our country. We need to have that image that we just write on papers. We need to stay at the State House having nice furniture. We need to see the next convoy of the president of Uganda being full of the killer EV cars and don't know dice V8 and something from China. We need to see that. And I'm sure a certain Domiano somewhere who has been planning to go and buy a V8 after he has seen Museveni driving the killer EV car. I'm sure there will be some incentive for them to also now try to drive Ugandan. And I think it will be very important. But lastly, I'm going to insist on the issue of national pride. I think this is the last trait you can lose as a country. At the moment when you lose it, then all the spheres of globalization and capitalism and the competition that happens and exploitation becomes severe because you no longer have any value to hold on to as a country. So national pride is important. There are some things we must stand still and say, these are Ugandan, this must be done by Ugandans. The competition has to be leveled to this level so that we can restore that. I think those two issues would go far away. Of course, again, in line with our education systems, let's drop the culture of reproducing other people's work that died long ago and try to check how do our Ugandans think let's start examining how do our students think and not how do our students memorize. I think that will go ahead in making them use their minds, innovate, and be creative, even within the examination rooms. Otherwise, I think that way we could have a better country. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. Denise?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think this has been an interesting engagement. So to sum up this, I think I would say that one of the things we should make sure we do is we need really a change in mindset, way up from the government to down, where we have average Ugandans who are parents, and we understand that actually the creative industry and the innovation industry are promising sectors that we should really engage in. And furthermore, to sum it all up, let us really focus on our competitive advantage. What highlights Uganda? If it's agriculture, let us first start from this, because at least majority of the Ugandans engage in this. And with this and the education sector and identifying our competitive advantage and a mindset change, we can be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nakulima, Denise. Thank you very much, Arindagye, Melody. Thank you very much, Edgar Mutungisa and Kasheija. Ricky, maybe for our viewers there who have been following this conversation, they need to know that I've been having a conversation with very powerful students of science. Initially, and all the other competitions, you would see law students and all these other disciplines taking up the podium. But today I'm privileged to be having students of science. I see Melody does pharmacy. I see Edgar does petroleum engineering and environmental management. Denise is a biomedical engineer. And of course, Ricky is a physiotherapist. Very powerful people. Thank you very much, Team MUST, for being part of this conversation. Thank you very much for your preparations into this conversation. This is the Inter-University Interface Debates by Center for Constitutional Governance, and of course with other partners at the Civic Space TV that we are having this conversation going. It's a long program that will take for about 6 months that will have students from different disciplines showcasing their talents, showcasing how much they are in the understanding of issues around the country on civil and political aspects of this country. This is a program that is meant to empower and encourage, and of course have leaders that will change the course of action in the spaces they belong. Thank you very much, Team MUST. I know the viewers was there. I've had fun following your conversation. They've enjoyed this conversation and they've learned a lot. I hope to have much more conversations with the other teams that are on in this group. And I hope to see the physical interaction or competition going. I see there's potential already in this university, especially this group. My name is Masisa Demiano, and for Center for Constitutional Governance and the Civic Space TV with the Inter-University Interface Debate, I say thank you and good evening for now.